Hello, this is Professor Hagee. Surprise, surprise. And I decided just to do a little video talking about um some things that uh, I wanted to talk about. First of all, I realized that I didn't do an introduction thing as well, that you guys introduced myself. Um, and so I'm going to do a little bit of that. Then I wanted to talk about a little bit about the teaching philosophy, some of the things you guys talked about there. Hopefully, you were able to look at each other's. I think I had that set where you could see what each of you put down for your under the teaching philosophy assignment there. Um, and then I'll try to keep this short. We'll have some more videos, but we'll kind of start with a little bit about me, my kind of little or my teaching bio, I guess. So I've been teaching science and or doing science since 1982. I received my undergraduate degree in 1982 from then Kearney State College, now University of Nebraska at Kearney. And my first stint of teaching, I taught high school for 8 years. And then in 1990, went back to UNK to work on my master's degree in science ed. And working on my master's degree, I was uh, TAing in Gen Bio labs and zoology labs, as well as doing my graduate work. And I did a master's research project with Dr. Erickson, who was at UNK at that time, and worked with isolating viruses from freshwater clams and doing some characterization of the viruses I isolated. Um, After doing my master's, I decided I wanted to continue on with some more research and graduate work. So I went to UNL and I was TAing early on Gen Bio Labs at UNL. Then eventually I got started team teaching a course called Hands-on Biology for Elementary Education Majors. And then at the same time, I was doing research for Dr. Pardee in his lab, working with the chlorella virus, which is a virus that infects green algae, the chlorella algae, but it only infected the chlorella algae that was a symbiont in the green paramecium, Paramecium bursaria, and then the green hydra. And it was only a and that virus actually was discovered at UNL before I got there. But so after finally got back out, or sorry, got back into teaching in '99. I taught at Glenwood, Iowa, teaching biology classes at Glenwood, Iowa. At Glenwood, Iowa, I got hooked up with Iowa Western Community College, doing the honors early start there. And then in 2002, I started doing some adjunct work at Iowa Western, teaching night classes there. And I taught for them, and I've been still teaching there at Iowa Western. So I've been teaching as an adjunct at Iowa Western for I think like 22 years. And most of that time I've been doing microbiology classes at Iowa Western. Um, I ended up leaving Glenwood. I was hired by the principal that was at Glenwood, who was involved in hired me away from Glenwood. So I started teaching at Louisville, Nebraska, just south of Omaha here. I actually live in Omaha, but teaching in Louisville. And I'm still teaching in Louisville. I've been teaching at Louisville for 21 years at Louisville. Um, Most of now what I teach, I do all the sophomore biology. I do anatomy physiology. I do a semester of zoology. I started 3 years ago doing a semester of microbiology at Louisville. Then through UNK, I do dual credit classes. I do the UNK first semester UNK Biology 105, then second semester at Louisville, I do UNK Biology 106. Um, During my time at Louisville, I also taught chemistry. I taught freshman physical science. I taught middle school life science for a little time there. Um, and then again, like I said, I've been adjuncting at Iowa Western. I in 2017, I started doing the online science methods for UNK. And so that's again still doing that as well. So I really, so just again, just a little bit about me. Take up too much time there, but so I've got a little bit of uh, of time into teaching. So I guess so. Hopefully that'll help you with answering your questions and helping you develop into teachers, which some of you are already out teaching in the transition program. I think all but one of you, I think Josh is the only one that's not in transition. So my philosophy, of course, is obviously has evolved over that time. Kind of when I started out teaching, it was more, reading, writing, doing, and the more times you read, write, and do, the better you're going to learn science. And of course, working on, I've always been an activity based or doing, incorporating labs in all my classes. Was teaching, have been teaching. But of course, that's changed a little bit over time. Especially with the development of the new science standards. So now I see our role as far as in science teaching as helping students understand how science works. And so it's, a big part of that is, gathering data, organizing data, the tables and graphs, analyzing, interpreting the data, and discussing, the data. What does the data show? What does it mean? Of course, that fits nicely into the new science standards, but there's also, again, been a switch in how we teach science with the new science standards, where it's more, you're using phenomena to introduce topics, and be it an anchoring or overarching phenomena that I use to try to introduce certain topics. And then you also have maybe individual lesson phenomena that's introducing specific lessons within that unit. And so I've been, since then, since the new science standards came out, revising or revamping my lessons to be, more three-dimensional, to, incorporate those, the workings of having students discover and do science. But there's always still that need for, students to get that basic foundation of understanding material and topic material. So trying to incorporate all that can be a chore, and it's still, even for me, still a work in progress, I guess I would say. I every year, even after all these years, I still look at ways that I can do things better. And one of the things that has really increased my my comfortability with teaching and my, making me a better teacher was incorporating the use of technology. And we'll talk about some of those things that I've used, not say on this video, but I might mention a few, but we'll do more of that later on. And of course, with the new science standards, you're also trying to make those real world connections that hopefully help students, be interested in those lessons and interested in that discovery aspect of teaching science, learning science, and doing science, really. So I really enjoyed reading through your what you guys wrote on your philosophies, and if you guys had a chance to read each other's, you'll see a lot of commonality, a lot of common things, and a lot of things that maybe not so much connected with actual teaching of science, but just teaching nowadays in general. So I just jotted down a few things that you guys had mentioned, and some of you mentioned repeatedly seeing some of these things pop up. Again, if you're, for some of you that are transitioning from into middle school or into high school teaching, there is obviously a difference. In elementary, middle school, and high school science teaching or teaching in general, there are differences there. In my high school classes, there's everything that I do is connected to preparing for tests that they're going to have to take over the material. So, I basically have three components, I guess you could say. I build my lessons into using a website called Nearpod, which I'll talk about that later, and I'll actually do some videos showing a lesson that I do using Nearpod. But and I'm going to ask you guys to kind of take a look at that, and maybe some of you that are out teaching already maybe have run into that, run into Nearpod. But I can build, have a Google Slides or PowerPoint, and then I have the Nearpod add-on that opens it up where I can embed stuff. I can, embed videos. I can embed formative assessments, questions, quizzes, matching type activities that I use for formative assessments into that lesson. So that's one of the things, and you can do a live version of that where the Nearpod, they join the Nearpod lesson and it opens up on their devices. And then as we go through it slide by slide, it moves on their device as well. And then if there's a formative assessment or a pretest or something like that I embed, then I get to see all their answers. So it really keeps them engaged in that lesson. The other thing that they do for me is I always have a set of what I call study questions. So, and I've moved most of all those into a Google form that they fill out, just a set of questions that are involving the topic that I want them to answer. Then once they submit that, then I can push out or they can see then my answers to those questions and compare it to theirs. And then of course, incorporating lab activities, and again, incorporating labs that are, I'll have maybe like two components to the lab. First part of the lab, maybe just doing just the basics of, so for example, in cell respiration activity, which is, I use that kind of as my phenomenon. I give them the protocol for activating yeast, and then they measure the rate of CO2 production in the yeast. And then the second part of that is they have to come up with a change. Change one of the normal factors or normal variables, and then design an experiment to collect data to see what effect that change had. And then we share that and analyze that and do those types of things. So again, those are the basic things. I have my basic Nearpod lesson. They have study questions they're doing. Sometimes there may be some other things that they do, and then there's lab activities. But those are the three basic things that they're doing for every lesson, and it might be multiple labs. It just kind of depends on the topic. So it's not and there are some things I do that are project-based, project-based learning, which is again getting them actively involved. A lot of you talked about setting those expectations for and having structure and safety within the classroom and being consistent, having consistent consequences. And then also some of you talked about flexibility, because my saying is fair does not mean equal. So depending on situations, you have those set expectations, but then sometimes you got to be flexible depending on the situation, right? So fair does not always mean equal. Again, one of the things that I developed, becoming better at over time, was developing those relationships with the students in your classroom. Back in the old days, that you didn't really do that. You were told not to do those types of things, right? But now it's a big thing, and then getting the students to making some connections with those students, and especially I see it help with those students that struggle, is trying to make some connections and get them. Basically, it's like getting them on your side, right? Again, showing that you care about everyone in the classroom, you care about them, and hoping to develop relationships where they want to work for you, they want to do the assignments and do the things you ask them to do. And some of you talked about what I call students bringing in baggage. They're bringing in this all these issues from outside the classroom that can affect, how they behave in the classroom. And their behavior is not always tied to directly in the classroom. It's tied to something that happened at home or happened or outside of school or wherever. So we have those, again, those issues that we have to be cognizant of and have to kind of deal with. One of you, I can't remember who, but mentioned about, using cell phones. That is, and that's a policy, or, we've gone to now to where they have to, when they're in the classroom, cell phones have to either be, we have phone caddies that we can put them in, or they have to be out or not out. Now, there are times though that I'll, like for test times, all my tests are Google Forms tests that they take on their Chromebooks. And so I have them, if they have their cell phone, if it's not in the caddy, then they have to have it out on the table where I can see it, type of thing. But yeah, that was, we were having that issue. And the school finally went to a policy that in the classroom, no cell phones are supposed to be visible or out. And we really haven't had a problem with students buying into that. At first there were that concern that it's just going to be a problem, but it really wasn't. I think most students have no problem with that. Again, I mentioned about using technology. I'm really big on using technology to help with my lessons, to help make my teaching easier. Of course, because information can be accessed, as you guys know, with a keystroke, you can access any information. So, and we use online open access resources as far as a textbook. But again, a lot of the information, I use that where there's something that I want them to find out, I have them search, and then we talk about it, talk about what they find. Part of that too is one of the things, and this is from a superintendent I had in the past, and he always preached, don't be afraid to fail, because tomorrow is another day. So try things. Don't be afraid if it doesn't work. If it doesn't work the way you thought. And I know some of you talked about it first in the transitions. Now you're being out into teaching and you're just kind of thrown in there, right? And you're having to learn on the fly. And and some of you talked about, you learned some lessons on some things you won't do next year, type of thing, right? And so that's what it's all about. It's about trying different things. Of course, over the years, I've developed labs that I've modified. I've gotten from others or taken labs that I've seen and modified them to make them fit for me. And I've designed some my own design labs too. So, and that's a lot of it too, is finding those resources that you can use in the classroom, be it an activity, be it a lesson, be it a video that's going to help help with your teaching. Excuse me. Again, keeping students engaged and motivated. Engaged, again, the Nearpod lessons that I use do a real good job. I think keeping them engaged in lessons, because they're actively going to have to do something as we come along within the lesson. Motivating sometimes is tough. You're always going to have some students that are really highly motivated because they enjoy science, and you're going to have students that don't enjoy science. I have all the sophomores, so of course I get a mixture, right, of those that like science, those that don't. But I still think that projects and activities, getting them involved in those types of things really helps with that motivation, because that's, they enjoy doing things like that. So mentioned about dealing with student technologies, students using iPads and Chromebooks and stuff, and that's tough. So we have our school uses a site Louisville called Go Guardian, and so everybody's in the Go Guardian, and so when you open up Go Guardian, then you get to see what they have on their laptop. And so I use that to help monitor if we're in a lesson, then I can see if they're in the lesson. Then you actually get a little report after the lesson, after you close Go Guardian out, how many were on, what sites they might have been on if they jumped off, or how long they were on your site, the Nearpod lesson or whatever. So there are those technologies out there, and maybe some of your districts are using those. But again, that is a thing. Sometimes it's just, I tell them, well, just close your Chromebooks, close this because you don't need them. I'm going to talk to you, or we're going to do this, or we're going to do that, where you don't need to be on. Because again, that also is an issue that you have to deal with. And then in smaller schools, I have, there's 3 of us that teach science there's 2 of us in the high school and 1 in the middle school. And so I do have some colleagues to bounce things off of, and some of you are out in situations, excuse me, some of you are in situations where you may be the only science teacher, and so that makes it tough. So then that's, trying to make some connections, reaching out. The NATS organization, Nebraska Association of Teachers of Science, that's a good organization to become a member of, that you can make some connections with other science teachers that way as well. You may have a teacher mentor, then that mentor may be in your area or may not be in your area, but again, using those teacher mentors, that'll help you with just how maybe things work within your school, because that's another whole issue that you don't learn about until you get into a school. All these other things that go along with teaching besides just teaching, doing your lessons, right? Teaching. Some other things that, and again, in this in this course, so in July, we're going to focus a lot on doing lessons or building some lessons. And for those of you in the transition program, it's going to look a little bit different, because I want you to kind of work on a lesson that you want to make. And I'm going to show you some of the technologies I use. And recently, well, just this year, I started using more game reviews like GimKit and Bookit. I've always used Quizlet as a review and used some of the Quizlet gaming live game things, but I started using some of these other tools and actually doing more in-class reviews using the game sites like GimKit. And I've really liked the results that I've been seeing with that. Again, just doing more in-class reviews before tests and assessments. Of course, you're going to be you're working, if you aren't already, on the Flynn's lab safety certification, which will really help you with lab safety knowledge there. Ordering supplies is something that we can also talk about. When it comes time, you're going to have to order supplies, and doing that kind of varies depending on what school. Like we use different sources, but then I also still use like Carolina and Flynn and some of those other certain supplies. And then of course you're going to get extra duties as assigned, right? So then that's another issue that you really don't learn about till you get into the school. Lots of times that, oh yeah, I'm going to have to be this sponsor or do that, and when I got into teaching too, I coached. I wanted to coach. I coached volleyball for quite a few years, and I coached did some track for 8 years. So those are extra duties that I wanted to do and I enjoyed doing as well. So the other thing again that I wanted to know, and if you guys would be interested, which I think would be good to do, is if we do, maybe we can again finding a common time to do this, but just a group Zoom meeting where we can just sit and talk about things, talk about issues and things like that we want to discuss, that we can kind of help each other out with. So I will send out an email or asking maybe if there are certain day of the week, maybe like a Sunday evening or whatever, something like that might work to do that. And I know there might be times we could schedule a recurring one, and maybe if you can meet it, if you can come to it, we can come to it. If not, it's all right. But I thought about that might be a good thing to probably do as well, see if we could make that work. So okay, so I didn't want to make this too long, so you didn't get too bored watching it. But again, hopefully, again, we can help address some of the things you guys talked about in your philosophies, and help make teaching easier and more enjoyable for you, or enjoyable. It's going to be enjoyable. I've been doing it for a long time. I still enjoy doing it. So even after all these years. All right, I guess this has probably been going long enough, so I'm going to end here. And I will be sending out more information here within a few days. So thank you all for watching. Have a good evening.